Your brain has never once touched the world. Not the wind on your face, not the warmth of a cup in your hand, not the face of the person you love most. It sits in absolute darkness, sealed inside the curve of your skull, and everything you have ever called real has been built from electrical whispers it has never been allowed to verify. That single sentence has kept thoughtful people awake for centuries, and tonight, very gently, it might keep you awake for a little longer too. Not in worry, in wonder. Welcome. If you find calm in these slow explorations of strange and beautiful ideas, you are quietly welcome to stay, to settle in, and if it feels right, to follow along for more of these nights. There is no hurry here. What we are about to walk through, together, is an old suspicion. The suspicion that waking life and dreaming life are not opposites, but cousins. That the mind you trust to show you the world is the same mind that paints landscapes for you while you sleep. And that the line between those two states is far thinner and far stranger than ordinary mornings ever let us notice. We will move slowly. We will let one thought lean softly into the next. And by the time the night deepens, the question itself may begin to feel less like a puzzle and more like a kind of quiet, warm companion at the edge of sleep. Try for just a moment to picture the inside of your own head, not the face in the mirror, but the actual chamber behind it. The bone is thick, curved, and closed. There are no windows, no lamps, no small openings letting daylight through. Inside, it is completely dark and completely silent, always has been, always will be. And inside that quiet, sealed room sits the only organ that has ever known you. It has never seen a sunset. It has never heard a voice. It has never tasted anything, never touched anything, never smelled the rain on warm stone. It floats in a kind of soft fluid, in the dark, doing nothing but listening to faint electrical signals arriving along thin biological wires. That is its entire experience of existence. Tiny pulses of voltage, traveling in patterns, knocking gently at its door, and from those pulses, somehow it builds you a world. It builds the gold of evening light, the smell of bread, the feeling of someone's hand resting on your shoulder. It builds memory and meaning and the sense that you are sitting somewhere right now, breathing, present, undeniably here. None of that arrives from outside as the thing itself. It arrives as code, a long, fast, endlessly arriving stream of code, written in the language of the nervous system. That is the first strange truth we have to sit with. The room where your reality lives is, in a real and physical sense, a sealed room. And every color, every sound, every soft and lovely texture of the world you know is a translation, a guess made by a quiet organ that has spent your entire life in the dark. Some neuroscientists describe it almost like a submarine captain. The captain never sees the ocean, only screens, only dials, only sonar pings and the slight changes in pressure. Every decision about what lies outside is made from indirect information, and yet that captain might spend a whole career feeling like they know the sea intimately, when in truth they have never once stepped into it. Your brain is that captain, the screens are your senses, and the ocean is everything you have ever called the real world. This is not a sad thought, though at first it can feel disorienting. There is something deeply tender about it too. The organ inside your skull is doing its very best for you. Every moment of every day, in complete darkness, it is composing a vivid, continuous breathing experience so seamless that you almost never notice the composition is happening at all. You just live inside the painting. And maybe that is why, when the world outside grows quiet at night, when there is less light, less sound, fewer signals to weigh against, the mind sometimes loosens in a strange way. The captain's screens dim, the room remains as it always was, dark, silent, sealed. But suddenly the painting in there starts moving differently. It is in that loosening, perhaps, that the first quiet doorway between waking and dreaming begins to appear. Not as a wall, more like a curtain that has always been there, simply too lit from one side for anyone to see through. Tonight, slowly, we are going to walk closer to that curtain. Step outside in the middle of a clear afternoon. Look up at the sky, There is brightness everywhere, this blazing, almost dizzying blue, and it feels like an obvious property of the world, as if the sky simply is that color, as if light simply is that intense. But here is the quiet truth. Brightness is not in the sky. Loudness is not in the bell. Redness is not in the rose. These are not things the universe hands you, fully made. They are things the brain decides to add. Physics, when you ask it carefully, only knows about wavelengths of radiation and patterns of vibrating air. There is no blue hiding inside a photon. A photon is just a tiny ripple of energy with a particular frequency. It does not glow. It does not shine. It does not carry color the way a parcel carries a label. The blueness happens later. Inside you, light reaches your eye, strikes a layer of cells in the back of it, and is converted into electrical signals. From that moment on, there is no light anymore, just code traveling. The brain receives that code in a place at the back of the head, and from those streams of voltage, somehow, it composes the experience of color. The blue of the sky is, in a very real sense, painted by you, for you, in a quiet inner studio you have never visited. The same is true for sound. Out in the world there is no music, there is only air, moving in waves. A guitar string vibrates, and the air around it is pushed and pulled in delicate ripples. Those ripples reach your eardrum, which trembles, which moves tiny bones, which stir tiny hairs in a curl of fluid, which fire tiny nerves. Then, somewhere deep in the brain, all of that becomes a melody that can move you to tears. The melody was never in the air was only moving, and warmth. You touch a stone left in the sun. It feels warm, but warm is not in the stone. The stone has a certain amount of molecular motion. Your skin notices a difference in temperature. Signals go inward, and inside, the feeling of warmth is made for you. The stone in itself is not warm. It is simply doing what it does, and your nervous system is interpreting. This is the layer almost no one walks around aware of, the qualities that make our world feel rich, alive, and obvious. The gold of late light, the depth of a voice, the softness of fabric, the sharpness of cold morning air are all inventions, not lies, not illusions in the dismissive sense, but translations, beautiful, careful translations from a thinner, simpler outside into a thicker, richer inside. In a way, the universe is much quieter, dimmer, and plainer than it seems. The colors, the music, the warmth, the flavors, the textures, the moods of light, all of these belong to minds, without minds noticing it. The world would be a vast, dark hum of moving particles and silent fields, and you, sitting wherever you are right now, are one of those minds. A quiet little studio adding color to a colorless world. It is almost generous in a strange way. Reality outside is rough draft. We, somehow, are the soft revisions. There is a small experiment you can run in your own home, with nothing more than a moment of attention. Look across the room at something familiar, a chair, a cup, the edge of a doorway. Notice how complete it looks, how finished, how obvious. You are not assembling that chair in your awareness. It is simply there, fully formed, no effort required. That feeling of effortless seeing is one of the most successful illusions a living thing has ever produced, because in truth your brain is not receiving a clean picture from your eyes. The signal arriving from the retina is messy, incomplete, full of gaps, full of motion blur, and constantly interrupted by blinks. The eye has a literal blind spot. The center of your vision is sharp, but the edges are surprisingly fuzzy. If you saw the raw data, it would look almost nothing like the smooth, steady world you experience. So how does the brain give you a chair instead of a blur? The leading idea in the last few decades of neuroscience is something called predictive processing. The basic notion is gentle and almost philosophical. The brain does not wait passively for sensory information to arrive and then assemble it like a slow puzzle. Instead, it is constantly making predictions about what it is about to sense. It runs a kind of inner model of the world, and it uses that model to guess, ahead of time, what should be out there. Then, when actual signals arrive, the brain mostly checks whether its guesses were right. It pays attention to the surprises, the mismatches, the small differences between what it expected and what actually came in. In other words, what you are seeing right now is not really the world. It is your brain's best guess about the world, lightly corrected by the senses. This is a strange and somewhat upside-down picture. We tend to imagine perception working from the outside in. Light enters, the brain interprets, the picture appears, but predictive processing flips this. The picture is generated from the inside, and the outside is mainly used to keep that inner picture from drifting too far off. You can feel the edges of this any time the model gets it wrong. The shadow that startles you, just for a half second, before you see it, is only a coat on a chair. The voice you heard calling your name that turned out to be wind. The face you thought you saw in the crowd before realizing it was a stranger. In each of those moments, your brain guessed first, and the senses corrected after. Most of the time, you never notice this happening, because the guesses are very good. Your brain has had years of experience predicting what cups and chairs and faces and rooms look like. Its inner model has been trained quietly by your entire life, but the implication when you sit with it gently is remarkable. The vivid world you live inside is not a perfect copy of an outside reality. It is more like an extremely talented forecast, a continuous real-time forecast, refined by sensation, but never actually escaping the inside of your skull. You are not seeing the world. You are seeing your brain's expectations of it, kindly adjusted by light. There is a word neuroscientists have begun to use for ordinary perception, and the first time you hear it, it almost feels too strong. They call it controlled hallucination. It sounds dramatic, but once you sit with the idea long enough, it begins to feel less like a provocation and more like a quiet description of something that has been true the whole time. A hallucination in everyday language is when you see or hear something that is not there. The brain, for one reason or another, generates an experience without an outside cause. We tend to treat this as a rare, broken state, something that happens to people in unusual conditions. But if perception is mostly generated from the inside, then ordinary seeing is already doing something very similar. The brain produces an experience. The senses simply vote on whether that experience matches the world. Think of it this way. When you dream, your brain generates an entire environment, an entire body, sometimes entire conversations, all without any incoming sensory data telling it what to make. It is a kind of free, untethered hallucination, and it can feel completely real while it is happening. Waking perception, then, is the same process, but tethered. The brain is still generating the experience. The room around you, the surface beneath your hands, the soft hum of whatever is in the background, all of it is being produced inside. The only difference is that, during the day, the senses are constantly tugging at that production, correcting it, voting on it, saying yes, more like this, no, less like that. The hallucination stays close to the world because the world keeps reminding the brain what is actually out there. That is what makes it controlled. Not absent, controlled. This is the framework that some thinkers in modern neuroscience have suggested. The idea that what we call perceiving reality and what we call hallucinating are not two different processes, but two settings on the same dial. One has its volume turned up on outside signals, the other has its volume turned up on inner generation, and we move along that dial more often than we realize. Have you ever stared at a slowly changing pattern of light on a wall as you were drifting off, and slowly seen faces, animals, landscapes emerge from it? That is the dial sliding. Have you ever been so tired that the world started to feel slightly dreamlike, slightly unreal, slightly painted? That is the dial sliding. Have you ever, in a moment of quiet, felt the entire room around you almost glow with strange specificity, every detail standing out as if newly made? That too is the dial. What we call agreeing with the senses is what we have learned to call reality. What we call drifting away from the senses is what we have learned to call imagination, daydream, or dream. But the underlying machinery in many ways is one continuous act of inner painting. So when you look around your room right now, You are not encountering the world as a bare fact. You are inside an extraordinarily careful, sensory-checked hallucination, slow, steady, accurate enough to keep you alive, beautiful enough to keep you in love with being alive. The lights are on, the hallucination is gentle, and it is yours. Here is something a little uncomfortable, and then something a little wonderful. The now you feel right at this moment, the immediate, fresh, present instant, is not actually immediate. It is slightly late. By the time you notice it, the world has already moved on. Signals take time to travel. Light hits your eye, and it takes a small fraction of a second for that information to reach the visual areas of your brain. Sound takes a different amount of time. Touch on your hand takes longer still, because the nerve signal has to travel all the way up your arm. Pain from your foot is the slowest of all, with its long, soft journey up the spine. If perception were just a raw stream of senses, the world would feel terribly out of sync. Your hand would feel things noticeably after your eyes saw them happen. A clap would arrive at your ears slightly before it arrived at your hands. A footstep would feel slower than it looked. But that is not how experience feels. Experience feels seamless. Everything happens in one smooth, unified moment. That smoothness is a quiet act of stitching. The brain, behind the scenes, gathers signals that arrived at different times, holds them briefly, lines them up, and presents them to you as one neat package. The now you experience is not the raw arrival of information. It is a carefully edited version of recent events, assembled to feel like a single instant. Some researchers estimate that this stitched present sits roughly a fraction of a second behind the actual world. Not much in human terms, a blink and a half, but enough that, technically, you have never experienced the true present moment. You have only ever experienced a recent past, delivered to you as if it were happening right now. There is something almost dreamlike about this. In dreams, time often loops, stretches, jumps, or skips, and you tend not to notice while it is happening. The dream simply feels like the present. In waking life, something similar is going on, just quieter. The brain decides when now begins and ends. It edits short delays out of awareness. It hides its own seams, and it does more than that. It also fills in moments that did not quite happen. If you flick your eyes from one side of the room to the other, you do not see the blur of movement that should accompany it. Your brain quietly removes those blurry slices and stretches the time on either side of them, so the experience feels continuous. You essentially lose a small slice of your life every time your eyes move quickly, and you never miss it. This means the smoothness of your day, the continuous flow from one moment into the next, is not a feature of time itself. It is a feature of how your brain has chosen to present time to you. The actual signal is patchy, delayed, and full of small gaps. The experience is glossy, immediate, and whole. Once you know this, you start to notice how much resembles dreaming, even at noon. The same brain that edits your dreams together without obvious cuts is the brain that edits your waking life into one continuous reel. The editing is just so good you almost never see the cuts. Almost. If you piece together everything we have walked through so far, a strange and almost beautiful image begins to form. The skull is a sealed room. The senses are slow translators. The colors and sounds are inventions. The present moment is a quiet edit. The brain guesses first and corrects later, and the world you live in is a controlled hallucination, lit and tinted from the inside out, which means the most accurate way to describe your daily experience might not be that you are looking at the world. It might be that you are looking at a painting that updates in real time, yes. A painting that responds to actual signals, yes. A painting that has been honed by millions of years of evolution to stay accurate enough to keep you safe, fed, and connected, yes. But still, in the deepest sense, a painting, composed inside the dark of your head by an organ that has never seen what it is depicting. And here is where the heart of this chapter quietly arrives. If reality as you know it is a painting, then dreaming is simply a painting made when the senses have gone offline. The artist is the same. The studio is the same. The materials, neurons, and electrical patterns are the same. Only the source of input has changed. In waking, the artist works partly from observation. In dreaming, the artist works freely from memory, mood, fragments, half-thoughts, and old impressions. That is why dreams can feel so seamlessly real. The same hand that paints your living room is painting the strange staircase in last night's dream. There is no second machine activated for sleep. There is no special projector that turns on only in REM. The dreaming you and the waking you are using the same canvas. Some neuroscientists put it almost gently, like a confession. They say that perhaps the brain is always dreaming, that waking life is just a dream that is being constantly compared to the world, and sleep is when the comparison softens and the dream is allowed to drift. If that is true, then the moment of waking each morning is not really an arrival into reality. It is more like a tightening, a pulling in of the inner painting toward the outer signal. And the moment of falling asleep is the loosening of that grip. The painting is still being made. The dial just slides toward freedom. It is worth pausing here for one breath and feeling what that means. It means that the world you feel so certain about, the room you are in, the people you love, the texture of this very moment, has always been an act of imagination, carefully steadied by the senses. The certainty is not a sign that you are touching reality directly. It is a sign that your brain has done its work so beautifully that the seams cannot be seen, and it means that what we call dreaming is not as foreign as it seems. It is the same hand, the same studio, the same long, patient project of building a world. In the next chapter, we will step quietly into that studio while it is working at night, and we will look at the curious fact that the difference between waking and dreaming may be far smaller and far stranger than morning ever lets us notice. We tend to picture sleep as a kind of switch. The day ends, the lights go down, the eyes close, and somewhere inside us a little lever flips. Off. Done. The mind goes dark, like a theatre after the show. But sleep, when you look closely, does not behave like that at all. It behaves much more like a slow change of cast. The same theatre stays open, the same lights stay on, just differently arranged. The same audience, your inner awareness, settles into a different seat, and on the stage, different parts of the mind step forward to perform, while others quietly walk into the wings. Across a single night, your brain moves through several distinct phases of activity, each with its own pattern of electrical waves, its own chemistry, its own purpose. Some are slow and deep, with long, gentle waves moving across the cortex like swells on a calm sea. Some are bright and rapid, almost as awake as waking, with fast little ripples and vivid inner motion. None of them are the same as full unconsciousness. None of them are simply off. In other words, the curtain never fully falls. It changes color, it shifts texture, but the stage is always alive. This is one of the more quietly astonishing facts about sleep. Even in your deepest, dreamless-seeming hours, neurons are firing in coordinated patterns. Memories are being sorted, like a librarian working overnight, putting today's experiences onto the right shelves and leaving tomorrow's space clear. Hormones are being released, connections between brain cells are being strengthened in some places and gently loosened in others, as if the architecture of the mind is being remodeled while you rest. If you could place a microphone somewhere deep inside your sleeping head, you would not hear silence. You would hear something more like a soft, intricate music, layered, patterned, almost orchestral, different sections of the brain quieting and rising in turn, and as the night moves, the music shifts. Early on, the slow, deep waves dominate, heavy stillness, the body relaxes, heart rate drops, breathing settles into long, slow rhythms. The world outside has mostly stopped being important. The signals from the senses are being filtered out, far up the line, before they can wake the higher mind. Then, after a while, something interesting happens. The brain begins to brighten again. The fast, lively patterns reappear. The eyes start moving rapidly beneath their lids. Heartbeat quickens slightly. Breathing becomes a little irregular. To outside observers, you look almost as if you are waking up, but you are not. You are entering a state where dreams typically run wildest, where stories play, where strange landscapes unfold inside the unmoving body. Then, slowly, that state passes too, and the deep, heavy waves return. Up and down the night goes, in long, patient cycles, like tides. What this gentle architecture reveals is that the simple idea of asleep and awake hides a much richer reality. The mind is not turning off and on. It is moving through different settings, different chemistries, different ways of relating to the world. And here is the soft suggestion that lives at the heart of this chapter. If sleep is not an off switch but a setting, then waking and dreaming may not be opposites at all. They may be neighbours on the same dial, the same theatre, the same audience, the same hand running the lights, just a different show for a different hour in the long quiet performance of being you. There is a small experiment most of us run on ourselves several times an hour without realising it. We pick up a book, or look at a screen, or listen to someone talking, and try to stay focused. 5 minutes later, our mind has wandered. We are thinking about a conversation from yesterday, an errand for tomorrow, a half-imagined scene that is neither memory nor plan, just drifting. We tend to treat this as a failure of attention, a small embarrassment, the mind slipping its leash again. But in neuroscience, that drifting state has a name. It is called the default mode. And the network of brain regions that runs it is one of the most fascinating and quietly important systems we know of. The default mode network was discovered almost by accident. Researchers were studying what happened in the brain during demanding mental tasks. They noticed that certain regions reliably became less active when people were focused, and reliably became more active when people were doing nothing in particular, resting, daydreaming, letting the mind go where it wanted. Those regions, working together, seemed to be the home of mental life when there was nothing pressing to do, the home of memory replayed without reason, the home of imagined conversations, the home of what if I had said this, and what would it be like if, the home of an inner narrative running quietly underneath everything else. And then came the strange discovery. The very same network, almost identically, becomes active during dreams. Pause for a moment with that. The brain regions that wander when you are bored at your desk are the same regions that build the dream you had last night. The faces, the rooms, the long unfamiliar staircases, the same circuits behind the daydream that washed over you on your commute. In other words, the dreaming mind is not as far away as it seems. It is the same system that hums beneath your waking hours, just released. During the day, attention to the outside world keeps it lightly suppressed. It still runs. You can feel it in the quiet moments, when you stare out a window and a memory drifts up unbidden, or when you walk somewhere familiar and a scene from years ago appears in your inner vision as if it were yesterday. But when sleep comes and the outer world stops demanding attention, that network is left more or less alone with itself, and it does what it always does. It tells stories. Dreams, from this view, are not strange visitors from somewhere else. They are what your mind does naturally, whenever it is not being held in place by the outside world. That subtly rearranges how we might think of our own days. The mental wandering you scold yourself for during a long meeting is the same gentle weather that produces your most vivid nights. The little fragments of half-thought that float through your mind in the shower belong to the same family as the dream you cannot quite remember by lunch. They are different volumes of the same broadcast, and it suggests something kind too, that the imagining mind is not a flaw, it is a constant, a quiet lifelong companion that paints small private movies in the background of every hour, and full feature films at night. You have been dreaming, in some quiet sense, all day. There is a question most of us have asked ourselves at some point, usually in the soft confusion of waking. Why, while we are in a dream, do we believe it? The story may be impossible, the geography may make no sense, people long gone may walk in calmly as if nothing has happened, and yet, while we are inside it, none of that strikes us as strange. The dream feels ordinary, lived, real. It is only later, looking back, that we shake our heads and wonder how we could have accepted it. The answer hides in a quiet part of the brain. There is a region at the very front of the head, behind the forehead, that does a lot of what we think of as adult thinking. It plans, it weighs options, it compares the present to expectations, it notices when something does not add up. It is, in a soft way, the inner editor, the one who says, "Wait, that does not make sense." During the dreaming phase of sleep, that region quiets down. Not entirely, but noticeably. The brain is busy in many other ways, generating images and stories and emotions, but the calm, skeptical editor is mostly off duty. There is no one in the room to raise a hand and say, "Excuse me, but you cannot fly. Excuse me, but this person died years ago. Excuse me, but this hallway should not loop back to itself." And so, with no editor, the story flows. Whatever the dreaming brain produces is simply accepted. Strangeness becomes normal. Impossibility becomes ordinary. The dream is taken at face value, because there is no part of you free enough to question it. This explains a great deal about why dreams feel so convincing. It is not that they are unusually realistic. Often they are not. It is that the very faculty that would notice the unrealism has been gently turned down for the night. Now sit with this for one slow moment and consider what it might mean for waking life. Your inner editor is not always at full strength during the day either. When you are exhausted, when you are emotionally swept up, when you are in love, when you are afraid, when you are deeply absorbed in a story or a screen, that critical faculty quiets. Not as much as in sleep, but enough that things you might normally question slip past unexamined. Beliefs settle in without inspection. The brain's running narrative gets accepted as truth simply because no one was sharp enough to challenge it. Some thinkers have suggested that this is why so much of our waking life feels so certain. Not because it is necessarily right, but because the part of us that would question it is busy with other things. Most of the time, we move through our days carried by the inner story, much as we are carried through a dream. We rarely pause to look around and say, "Wait, is this really how things are?" This is not a discouraging thought. It is more like a soft invitation. The same editor that goes silent at night also goes quiet during the day, and noticing that gives us a chance, sometimes, to question the dream a little, to wonder whether the certainties we wake up with are really as certain as they feel. The disbelief we suspend in dreams is, perhaps, only a stronger version of the disbelief we suspend each day. The dream's grip on us is just a louder echo of our world's quieter grip. Imagine a sleeping body. The eyelids are closed, the limbs are still, the breathing is slow. From the outside, almost nothing seems to be happening. A small, calm shape in the dark. Now imagine looking inside. In the phase of sleep when dreams are most vivid, the brain looks astonishingly awake. The visual areas at the back of the head are firing in patterns nearly as active as when you are looking at the world. The regions involved in hearing are alive too. The areas that handle movement, the same circuits that fire when you walk or run, are working as well, although other parts of the brain politely block the signals from reaching the muscles, so the body stays still. If those circuits could finish their journey, the sleeper would be running, reaching, jumping. Instead, the action takes place entirely in a sealed-off inner cinema. And then there are the eyes. Beneath the lids they move, quickly sometimes, in little darting motions, as if the sleeper were watching something. This is where the phrase rapid eye movement comes from. It is one of the simplest, most easily observed signs of dreaming, visible to anyone sitting quietly in the dark. What is most extraordinary, though, is what those eye movements suggest. The sleeping eyes are moving as if they are tracking a scene. They are scanning, focusing, turning towards something that is not there. There is nothing in front of them but the inside of their own lids. And yet, the inner world is convincing enough that the eyes follow it. The body is reacting, in this small way, to a place that does not exist outside the head. It is hard not to feel a quiet awe at this. There is a person, lying in a dark room. The world outside is doing nothing remarkable, but inside the closed eye, an entire reality is unfolding. Landscapes are being seen, voices are being heard, people are being met, and the body, in its silent way, is responding to it as if it were real. If perception is mostly generated from within, as we walked through earlier, then sleep is the moment when that inner generation is allowed to run freely. The senses are mostly muted, the outside world is barely tapping at the window, but the brain, still humming, still drawing, still composing, simply continues painting. Only now, without sensory correction, the painting can do anything it likes. It can build a city you have never visited. It can place you in a body that is not quite yours. It can introduce a stranger who somehow feels familiar. This is the deeper meaning of REM. It is not that the brain shuts down and then a separate dream mode turns on. It is that the brain's lifelong work of generating worlds continues uninterrupted, and we finally see what it is capable of when the outside loosens its grip. In a sense, the eye behind the closed eye is not new. It has been open all along. It is the inner eye, the eye that paints the room you sit in right now, that paints the face of someone you have not seen in years when you think of them, that paints the worlds you read about in books even though no light from those worlds has ever entered the room. At night, that inner eye is simply allowed to wander, and what it sees, no waking eye can ever fully follow. Most dreams happen without your awareness that you are dreaming. You wander through whatever scene the night has built for you, accepting it as life, until something pulls you up into waking, and you blink, and the whole world quietly reshapes itself into your bedroom. But sometimes, very rarely for most people, something different happens. Inside the dream, a small thought arrives. A whisper, almost. Wait, this is a dream, and the dream does not end. You stay inside it, but now you know. You know the staircase is not real. You know the city you are walking through has been built by your own mind, and yet the staircase remains. The city does not vanish. You are conscious and dreaming at the same time. This is what is sometimes called lucid dreaming. It is one of the strangest states the human mind is known to produce, and one of the most quietly important for understanding what consciousness actually is. Brain scans of lucid dreamers have shown something fascinating. During lucid moments, certain areas at the front of the brain, the ones associated with self-reflection and the ability to think about one's own thinking, become more active than they normally are during dreaming. It is as if the inner editor we spoke of earlier wakes up part way, not enough to end the dream, but enough to notice it, enough to step softly into the corner of the stage and watch the play from inside the play. That is a remarkable thing. It means consciousness can layer on itself. There can be awareness of the dream and awareness of the awareness, all running at the same time inside a sleeping head. And it raises a quiet question, the kind that makes the night a little stranger. If awareness can be added to a dream from inside, while the dream continues, then waking life might be a similar kind of state, with similar possibilities. Perhaps what we call being awake is itself a dream into which a certain level of awareness has already been layered, so completely that we forget the layer is there. Perhaps lucidity is not just something rare that happens at night. Perhaps it is something we have, in a small dose, all the time. There is something gentle to draw from this too. Lucid dreamers often describe a particular feeling when they realize they are inside a dream. Not panic, not the urge to escape. Often they describe a kind of soft relief, a loosening, the understanding that whatever is happening cannot truly harm them because it is being generated by their own mind. The world does not become less vivid, it becomes less threatening. Some thoughtful traditions, both ancient and modern, have used lucid dreaming as a quiet metaphor for waking life. The suggestion is not that waking life is unreal exactly, but that holding it with the lightness of a dreamer who knows might change how it feels to live in it. The same fears feel smaller, the same beauties feel more available. The same difficulties remain, but the grip loosens. You may never have a lucid dream. That is fine. Many people never do, but the simple knowledge that such a state exists, that awareness can be slipped quietly into the middle of an unfolding dream without breaking it, is enough to soften a few of the certainties we usually live by. There is, it seems, more than one door inside the night. When you set the pieces of this chapter beside one another, a quiet pattern begins to take shape. Sleep is not an off switch, but a different setting. The default mode network hums beneath both daydreams and night dreams. The inner editor that lets dreams feel real also softens during waking. The visual and movement areas of the brain are active in dreams the way they are active in life, and lucid dreaming shows that awareness can layer over either state. If you allow these threads to gather, a single suggestion forms, very softly. The mind may not have two theatres, it may only have one. Imagine a small dim cinema. There is a projector at the back, there is a screen at the front, and there is a viewer in the seat who sometimes looks closely, sometimes drifts. The projector is always running. It draws its images partly from a constant stream of incoming light, the senses, and partly from a deep library of memory, expectation, mood, and meaning. The film on the screen at any moment is a blend of both. Sometimes the light from outside is strong, and the film stays close to what is really there. Sometimes the light is dim, and the projector pulls more freely from its library, and the film drifts into stranger territory. In daylight, with eyes open, the outside floods the projector with information. The film hugs the world. We call this perception. In daylight, with eyes still open but attention loose, the projector slips a little. The film is still close to reality, but small inner images slide in. We call this daydreaming. At night, with the senses muted, the projector still hums, but it is mostly working from its library now. The film no longer needs to obey the outside world. It can build anything. We call this dreaming. And in those rare, layered moments when the viewer sits up and notices the film for what it is, without leaving the cinema, we call that lucidity. But it is the same projector, the same screen, the same viewer. This is the quiet heart of the suggestion we have been moving toward. The reason waking and dreaming feel so different is not because they use different machinery. It is because the mix of inputs changes. The brain's job is to generate a world. During the day, it does this in tight conversation with the senses. At night, the conversation goes quiet, and the brain talks mostly to itself. There is something almost humble in this idea. It means the strange dream you had last week was not a foreign visitor from another country. It was the same patient mind, working in a different light, and it means that the vivid waking morning you experienced today was not as separate from the dream as you imagine. It was the same projector, simply tuned more tightly to the outside. The two theatres of the title turn out to be one. What changes is the angle of the lamp, and perhaps that is why some thoughtful observers across many centuries and many cultures have looked at human life and quietly wondered if the word dream might apply more broadly than we usually allow. Not as a denial of the world, not as a claim that nothing is real, but as a soft recognition that the experience itself, on either side of sleep, is made by us, always. In the next chapter, we will let that recognition settle a little closer to home and ask what it might mean for the strangest dream of all, the dream of being someone. Each morning, before you have opened your eyes, before you have remembered the day's appointments, something quietly returns to you. A sense of being someone, a sense of being this someone, the same person who fell asleep, the same person who has lived through all the years behind you, the same person who has these particular thoughts, this particular voice in the head, this particular way of approaching the world. It feels like the most basic thing in existence, the one thing that is not in question, but like so many things that feel obvious, the sense of self turns out, on close inspection, to be one of the brain's most delicate constructions. You did not audition for this role. You did not choose it. You simply became it, slowly through years of childhood, through experience, through the constant feedback between body, brain, and world. And every morning, that role is restored. The character is rebuilt. The lines you have spoken before come naturally to you again. The story so far is loaded into the present. Some neuroscientists have suggested something gentle but striking about this. The self, they propose, is not a thing the brain has. It is a thing the brain makes. Just as the brain generates the experience of color or sound, it generates the experience of being a self, a continuous narrator, a central character at the heart of the day. If that is so, then the self is closer to a dream than we usually realize. It is composed, it is rendered, it is offered to you as one whole, even though, on closer inspection, it is built from many smaller pieces. The sense of being someone is not a single object found in a single place in the brain. It is the product of many systems working together. Memory contributes a sense of continuity. The body contributes a sense of being located somewhere. Emotion contributes a sense of mattering. Language contributes a sense of an inner voice. Together they produce the unmistakable feeling of being you, and here is the soft, almost dreamlike implication. That feeling can be altered. It can fade in deep meditation, where some practitioners describe a quiet state in which thoughts continue but the central I feels less present. It can dissolve in certain rare neurological events, where people describe themselves as still aware but no longer feeling like a separate person. It can shift in dreams, where you might find yourself in a body that is not yours, or watching the dream from outside your own form. It is not a single fixed object. It is a flame that can flicker. Most days the flame burns steady, and that steadiness is so reliable that we never stop to notice it is a flame at all. We assume the self is simply there, like a stone, but the more we look, the more it begins to resemble a beautiful, ongoing production. A character, woven again each morning out of memory and signal and habit, walking onto the stage as if they had been there all along. It is not that you are fake. It is that you are a quietly remarkable act of construction. A character the brain produces with such care that the production is invisible. A dream so well made that it forgets it was ever dreamed. And tonight, as you lie in the dark, that character is loosening its hold. The script is closing, the set is dimming, and whatever you are, beneath the role, is gently allowed to rest. A great deal of who you feel yourself to be depends on what you remember. The past, in its long, soft trail behind you, is the spine of the self. Without it, today would still feel like something, but it would not feel like yours. The continuity, the sense that this morning belongs to the same person who was here last year, comes from memory. So it is a tender thing to notice that memory, the very foundation of selfhood, does not work the way we tend to assume. We often picture memory as a kind of recording. A scene from the past sits in some inner archive, and when we want it, we play it back. The clearer the recording, the more accurate the memory, the more vivid the playback, the more it must be like the original moment. The truth is much stranger and much more interesting. Memory is not stored as a fixed recording. It is stored in pieces, scattered across different parts of the brain. The sights of a moment are kept by one region, the sounds by another, the emotional tone by yet another, the meaning of the event by another still. When you remember something, your brain does not retrieve a finished file. It reassembles. It pulls those scattered pieces together and stitches them into a scene, in the present moment, that feels like a memory of the past. In other words, every time you remember something, you are not playing it back, you are rebuilding it. The memory comes into being right then, in real time, out of the scattered traces left behind. The act of remembering is closer to dreaming than to reading, and like a dream, it is shaped by mood, context, expectation, and recent thought. The same event, remembered on a calm morning, might feel one way. Remembered after a difficult day, it might feel quite different. The original event is not changing, but what your brain assembles in the present, from whatever pieces are nearby, is changing constantly. There is more. Each time a memory is rebuilt, it is also slightly rewritten. New details get added in, often without anyone noticing. Old details get softened or replaced. Researchers studying this have found that with enough time, people can become utterly convinced of memories that, when examined, never actually happened the way they remember. Not because they are lying, because their brain faithfully and innocently kept reconstructing the past until the reconstruction drifted from what was there. This is a startling and almost vertiginous thought. The story of your life, the long thread you carry with you, is not stored cleanly somewhere. It is gently rewritten each time you visit it. The past you remember is partly being dreamed, right now, by the present you. The further back you go, the more this is true. The vivid childhood scene you can almost smell, almost touch. is, in a real sense, a composition built by an artist who was not there at the time, working from notes left by an earlier version of themselves. There is something poignant about this, and something freeing. The memories that hurt you, that you have carried for years, are not unchangeable monuments. They are quietly, slowly being rebuilt every time you revisit them, and they can be revisited differently. The story is not as fixed as it feels. The past is not behind you, sitting in a vault. It is here, in this very moment, being lovingly, imperfectly, reimagined by the same mind that paints the world around you. It is a kind of dream, a very long, very personal one. There is a feeling so constant we almost never name it. The feeling of being inside your body, of looking out through your eyes, of listening from behind your ears, of moving from the inside of your arms and legs. Your body feels like a small home that you live in, and you feel like the resident. It seems almost silly to question this. Of course you are in your body. Where else would you be? But here too, the brain has been quietly working in ways that, when noticed, feel almost dreamlike. The brain does not automatically know what counts as you. It has to figure it out constantly from a stream of incoming signals. There is information from the muscles telling it how the limbs are positioned. There is information from the skin telling it where touch is happening. There is information from the inner ear telling it about balance and orientation. There is information from inside the body, soft sensations of heartbeat, breath, hunger, warmth. And from all of these, the brain assembles a kind of inner map, a felt sense of where the body is and what its edges are. A body schema, and that map is not as stable as you might think. In a now famous experiment, researchers placed a person's hand on a table and hid it from view with a small screen. In front of them, where they could see it, they placed a rubber hand. Then, gently, they stroked both the real hidden hand and the visible rubber hand at the same time. In the same way, within a few minutes, most people began to feel something strange. The rubber hand started to feel like it was theirs. The signals were lining up well enough between sight and touch that the brain quietly updated its map. The body it claimed to live in had now expanded to include a piece of rubber. If you tap the rubber hand suddenly, the person flinches. This little experiment is not just a curiosity. It hints at something profound. The body you feel yourself to be in is not a permanent fact. It is a construction. The brain is constantly building it from incoming signals, and it can be fooled. With the right conditions, the sense of bodily ownership can stretch, shrink, or shift entirely. There are even rarer states, sometimes induced by certain conditions, in which people report feeling as though they are observing their own body from outside it, looking at it from above, floating slightly behind their own shoulder. These so-called out-of-body experiences are not necessarily mystical. They appear to arise when the brain's normal stitching together of bodily signals comes apart, and the felt sense of being inside the body is no longer reliably assembled. What this means, in the simplest terms, is that your sense of being a someone inside a body is not a brute fact about the universe. It is another piece of the brain's quiet work, another part of the dream. In dreams at night, the body you inhabit can be anything: taller, shorter, younger, older, sometimes not human at all. You step into these bodies without noticing the change, because the same map is being drawn from imagination now, instead of from signal. The body you live in during the day is just one of those maps, more stable, more practiced, but still a map. The home feels solid. It always has, but the walls were always painted from the inside. We have spent some time noticing how the mind builds the world, builds the self, builds the body, builds the memory. And it is natural by now to ask a quiet question. If all this construction is happening, who is the one experiencing it? Who is watching the dream of the self? This is one of the oldest and most beautiful unanswered questions humans have. Some have called it the question of the observer. Others have called it the hard problem of consciousness. It points to something very simple and yet very strange. You can describe everything the brain does, every neuron firing, every chemical released, every signal traveling, and somewhere in all that activity, An experience is happening. There is something it is like to be you, sitting here listening to this. Somewhere in the dark of your skull, a light is on, but no one has ever found that light. Neuroscientists can scan a brain in the most exquisite detail. They can watch which regions activate during different experiences. They can map the pathways of attention, of emotion, of decision. They can show with remarkable precision what is happening in the machinery. But the experience itself, the inner glow of awareness, has never been located. There is no spot on the scan that says, "Here is the watcher." There is only activity, patterns, signals, and somehow, somewhere in those patterns, the sense of being present arises. You can sit with this very quietly tonight and feel how strange it is. There is, in this very moment, an awareness of these words, an inner space where the words are being received. That space does not seem to be located anywhere specific. It seems to be just here, wherever here is. The watcher feels present, but the watcher cannot be pointed to, not by you, not by anyone else. This is not in itself a mystical claim. It is a careful observation. Different thinkers have tried to make sense of it in different ways. Some have suggested that consciousness emerges from the way information is integrated across the brain. Others have suggested it is a particular kind of self-modeling. Some have wondered whether it might be a fundamental feature of the universe, somehow expressed through certain physical arrangements. Others have argued that our concept of an observer is itself a slight illusion, and that what we call awareness is just another part of the dream. What unites these views is that none of them, yet, fully explains the simplest fact. That experience exists at all. There is, in this not knowing, a strange and almost reassuring softness. The most basic feature of your life, the fact that there is anything it is like to be you, sits quietly outside what any expert can fully describe. It is the gentlest mystery you carry. The watcher in the dark, who has been with you through every moment of your life, has never once been pinned down by any instrument. For our purposes here, what matters is the gentleness of this not knowing. You do not have to solve the question of who the watcher is in order to rest tonight. In fact, the deeper you look, the more it seems that the watcher does not insist on being known. It only insists on being. Whatever it is that is listening right now, in whatever quiet place it sits, can simply listen and let the rest of the dream go on. That, perhaps, is more than enough for one night. The person who falls asleep tonight will not be exactly the same person who wakes up tomorrow morning. This is not poetry. It is, in a quiet biological sense, simply true. While you sleep, your brain does something that, in the daytime, it cannot quite do. With the demands of the outer world set aside, with the senses muted, with the muscles still, the brain turns its attention inward. It reviews, it edits, it rearranges. The day's experiences, fresh and tangled, are slowly sorted, weighed, and woven into the longer story of your life. Memories that were vague and uncertain in the evening are sometimes clearer in the morning, not because you thought about them more, but because, while you slept, they were quietly moved from one kind of storage to another, from the fragile shelf of recent experience to the deeper shelves of long-term knowing. Some details were strengthened, others, less important, were allowed to fade. Connections between ideas were formed in the dark that no one was awake to make. And it is not only memory. The connections between brain cells themselves are being remodeled. Throughout the day, learning leaves small marks. New synapses form, old ones strengthen. By evening, the network is somewhat overloaded. Sleep appears to be a time when the brain gently adjusts this load. Some of the overgrowth from the day is pruned. The signal-to-noise ratio is restored. The architecture is, in a quiet sense, tuned. The self that wakes up in the morning carries this tuning. The mood that drowned you yesterday might feel slightly less heavy. The problem that seemed impossible the night before might feel approachable. Not because the world has changed, but because the inner instrument has been retuned by hands you never see. There is something quietly tender about this. The version of you that sat down to sleep tonight is being lovingly, invisibly maintained, like a small patient repair shop opening in the dark, working through delicate corrections while the customer rests in the chair, oblivious. By morning, the work is done, and the shop closes, and the customer steps out, slightly altered, often unaware. If the self is a kind of dream, sleep is when the dream gets to revise itself. The character is rewritten in small ways. Some traits are reinforced, some old wounds are softened slightly. New understandings, formed half-consciously during the day, find their place. This is part of why, when we are deprived of sleep for too long, we feel like we are losing ourselves. We are. Not in a dramatic way, but in a real one. Without the nightly retuning, the dream of the self begins to fray at the edges. Thoughts loop, emotions amplify. The line between memory and confusion begins to blur. The inner editor that holds the world together starts to slip. We become, in a soft sense, less like ourselves, because the version of us that we are familiar with depends on this quiet nightly work. And so the person who closes their eyes tonight is, in a real way, handing themselves over to a deeper, older process. Not vanishing, not surrendering, simply allowing the inner work to begin, trusting that what wakes will be slightly newer than what slept. The dream of you every night is gently rewritten by the dreamer that is also you. In a way, you are always becoming, not a finished self, but a self being continuously, softly revised. And tonight, that revision is welcome. That revision is in fact what rest is for. You can let it begin. Take a moment, if you can, to feel the flow of time. It seems to be the most obvious thing about being alive. One moment leans gently into the next. The past slips behind you. The future has not yet arrived. Right now, this moment is moving slowly but unmistakably into the next one. And yet, when you ask physics what time is, it grows quiet, and the answers begin to drift in surprising directions. In the equations that describe how the universe behaves at the deepest known levels, time does not behave the way it feels. Many of these equations are symmetrical. They work just as well played forward as backward. There is no obvious arrow built into the math telling the universe which way to flow. There is no equation that says, with certainty, this is the present, that is the past. The strong sense we have of now, distinct from then and yet to come, does not seem to live in the equations themselves. This has led some thoughtful physicists to suggest a strange possibility, that the flow of time, the felt sense of one moment becoming the next, may be more a feature of how minds experience reality than a feature of reality itself. In a certain way of looking, the universe may be more like a vast four-dimensional landscape where past, present, and future all exist together, and what changes is only which slice we find ourselves in. This is a soft and respectful "some have proposed," not a settled truth, just one of the quiet possibilities that physics leaves open. But it is enough to make you stop and look at your own experience. Your brain, as we walked through earlier, does not deliver reality to you in raw form. It edits, it stitches, it hides delays. It quietly removes the moments when your eyes are darting and presents the day as smooth. The strong sense of one moment flowing into the next may be another part of this stitching. The brain may be taking inputs that, at their most basic, are not arranged in any clear now, and gluing them together into a continuous river, simply because that is the most useful way to experience them. In other words, the flow of time, like the flow of color and the flow of sound, may be a brilliant construction, a way the mind organizes a deeper reality that does not in itself flow at all. This thought is dizzying at first, but if you let it sit, it becomes oddly peaceful. The relentless feeling that time is slipping away, that you are always running out of it, that today is rushing forward whether you are ready or not, depends partly on the inner machinery that makes time feel like a moving stream. Outside the experience, in the deeper equations, the past may not be gone in the way it feels gone. The future may not be approaching in the way it feels approaching. There may simply be a vast quiet structure, and minds like ours moving through it like lights, illuminating one slice at a time, painting the rest with memory and anticipation. It does not change what you must do tomorrow. It does not lengthen your day or shorten your night, but it gently softens the urgency. The relentless arrow you feel pointing forward is, in some quiet sense, drawn by the same hand that draws every other dimension of the dream. Time, too, may be partly painted from the inside. Imagine the color red, the deep red of an apple in late afternoon, the way it sits in your inner vision, even now vivid, specific, almost glowing. Now consider gently that no one else has ever seen that exact red. We agree on the word, we point at the same fruit, we use the same language to describe it, but the actual inner experience of red, the felt quality of it inside your awareness, has never been measured, never been shared, never been compared to anyone else's red. It exists only inside you, and every other mind that has ever existed has had its own version of red inside its own private space. There is no way to lay them side by side. There is no way to know whether what you experience as red feels, on the inside, anything like what another person experiences as red. It is a startling thought when you sit with it for a moment. The colors of the world, in this view, are not shared property. They are the most intimate things you have. Every shade you have ever loved, every gentle gold of a morning, every dusky blue of dusk, belongs to a private gallery that no one else has visited. We trade words about colors, we compare metaphors, but the colors themselves stay inside. This belongs to a broader idea that some thinkers in philosophy and neuroscience have explored gently, the idea of qualia, the raw, felt qualities of experience, the redness of red, the sweetness of sweetness, the warmth of warmth. These felt qualities seem to be fundamentally subjective. They live, as far as we know, only inside experience. They cannot be photographed. They cannot be transferred. They cannot, even with all our instruments, be fully described. Two brains, even healthy ones, can differ in fascinating ways. They may have slightly different distributions of color-sensitive cells in the eye, slightly different chemistry in their visual pathways, slightly different patterns in the brain regions where color emerges into experience. It is entirely possible, and some have argued likely, that the very same wavelength of light, sent into two different minds, gives rise to two slightly different inner experiences. You and the person beside you might be walking through subtly different worlds every day and never once notice it, because the only word you have for that quality is the same word they have. The label matches, the experience underneath may not. This is a quiet form of solitude, and also a quiet form of wonder. It means each mind in this world is, in some real way, a small private universe of colors and sensations. Billions of these universes walking past each other on streets, sharing meals, falling in love, raising children, each one painting its own private spectrum, never quite able to show another what it sees on the inside. And yet somehow we manage to live together. Somehow we agree well enough, on enough things, to build languages, families, cities, music, stories. The wonder is not that the inner colors might differ. The wonder is that, despite the depth of that difference, so much understanding still arises. If reality were as flat and shared as we sometimes imagine, life would be more uniform than it is. The strangeness of it, the richness, the small uncrossable gaps between minds, suggest that each of us is more like a quiet country than a passenger. Tonight, your inner colors belong only to you. They always have. It is a soft kind of privacy. Most of the time, the inner painting of the world stays steady. You wake up in roughly the same body, in roughly the same room, with the same time flowing forward and the same colors looking the same. This stability is so dependable that it can feel like a property of the world itself. But there are moments, scattered through every life, when the painting wobbles. Think of being deeply exhausted, the kind of tiredness that makes the day feel slightly off, as if you are watching it from one step behind your own face. Surfaces shimmer a little, sounds feel slightly distant, thoughts move in strange directions, leaping in ways they would not in a fully rested mind. The world looks the same on the outside, but the inside has loosened. Or think of a fever. The room can begin to bend at the edges, time can stretch and crumple, familiar objects can take on an unfamiliar weight, A wallpaper pattern that you have looked at 100 times can suddenly become alive with movement that is not quite there. The brain, under inflammation, is generating its inner world with slightly different settings. The painting bends, or think of the strange threshold just before sleep, when you are not yet asleep but no longer fully awake. Images can begin to drift into your inner vision unbidden. Voices may briefly seem to whisper when no one is speaking, falling sensations, flashes of strange scenes. This is hypnagogia, the soft border country between waking and sleep, and it is one of the most reliable places to feel the seams of the model, or think of moments of deep meditation. People who sit quietly with their own minds for long periods often describe gentle alterations in how the self and the world feel. Boundaries can soften, time can stretch. The sense of being a separate observer can become less sharp. The painting, again, is moving differently. These are not failures. They are not malfunctions. They are reminders. They remind us that the steadiness of normal waking life is itself a kind of achievement. The brain is working very hard, second by second, to keep the painting in its usual shape, calibrated, stable, familiar. And when the conditions that support that work are disturbed, the painting bends, and we get a brief look at how much was being done quietly in the background. In these moments, some thoughtful observers have noticed something that connects directly to our long theme of the night. The bent waking experience starts to resemble dreaming. Time loosens, logic becomes more fluid. Strange associations feel meaningful. Familiar things become slightly unfamiliar. It is as if the dial we mentioned earlier, the one between sensory-anchored perception and inner-generated dreaming, has slid a little in the dreaming direction. Even though the eyes are open, this is consistent with the broader picture we have been building. Waking and dreaming are not separate worlds. They are settings on the same instrument. And in altered states, that instrument can be heard playing in mixtures we do not usually notice. It can be a little disorienting to think about these states, but it can also be calming. The fact that your sense of reality can bend gently and reversibly in fevers and exhaustion and meditation and the edges of sleep is evidence that the steady world you usually live in is more delicate and more loved than you may have realized. Stable reality is not a given. It is a quiet daily gift, painted with great care behind the curtain of your skull. The further we follow the thread of how reality is constructed inside the mind, the more an old question begins to rise softly to the surface. If everything we experience is shaped by the brain's modeling, what is the world really like beneath that modeling? What is out there when no one is looking? This question has long belonged to philosophy, but in the last century, some physicists have started to entertain ideas about reality that surprisingly brush against it. One quiet thread in the deep theoretical conversations of physics is the idea that what we call matter may be less fundamental than what we call information. Some thinkers have proposed that, at the most basic level, the universe might be better described not as a collection of solid stuff, but as a vast and intricate pattern of relationships, of distinctions, of bits, in some abstract sense. On this view, the apparent solidity of the world is something that emerges from deeper informational structure, not something that simply is there. This is, importantly, a proposal, one model among others. It is not a settled fact. Many physicists would resist phrasing it too strongly, but the very existence of such ideas, among serious thinkers, hints that the question of what reality is really made of is more open than our daily experience suggests. Another thread, often discussed more in popular conversation than in established physics, is the so-called simulation argument. The general suggestion, framed carefully, is that if any civilization could one day produce richly detailed simulations of conscious experience, then there might in principle be more simulated minds than original ones, and we cannot easily prove from inside that we are not one of them. Some thinkers have entertained this as a logical possibility worth examining. Others have argued it is much less likely than it sounds. It is not a proven theory. It is one open speculation, gently offered as a thought experiment about how much certainty we can really have about the deepest nature of our reality. What is interesting, for our long, quiet theme tonight, is not whether these specific ideas are true, it is what they share. Each of them, in different ways, suggests that the world we experience may not be the bottom layer, that underneath the smooth painting of daily life, there may be patterns, structures, or processes that look nothing like what the painting depicts. This is, in a soft way, an echo of what neuroscience has been showing. The brain's painting is not the world. There is something deeper, the exact nature of that something deeper, whether it is information, energy, mathematical structure, or something we have no good name for, is a question no instrument has yet fully answered. And here we want to pause carefully. These possibilities, however striking, are explorations. They describe possible ways that the how of reality might work, the inner workings, the mechanics. They do not and cannot speak to the ultimate why of reality. They do not settle the question of origin, of meaning, of whether there is or is not a source behind all of this. Those questions remain, gently, beyond what any model can claim. What is honest to say is this: the universe we live in seems to be far stranger than ordinary perception suggests. The world inside the head is built. The world outside the head, when probed deeply, refuses to behave like a simple stage. And the gap between the two is full of quiet, beautiful mystery, with plenty of room for humility on every side. We are dreamers, perhaps, inside something that is itself far more than it appears. After so much wondering, it can be tempting to feel that we have lost our footing entirely. If the brain paints the world, if time may not flow the way it feels, if colors are private, if the self is a construction, if even the deepest layers of reality may be different from what they seem, then what exactly can we say we know? Here, at the edge of the night, it is worth being very honest. We know quite a lot. We know how to grow food. We know how to heal wounds. We know how to build instruments that detect the faintest tremor in space-time and the smallest particle inside an atom. We know how to find one another across continents, send words and pictures and voices, comfort each other from far away. We know how to raise children, how to write poems, how to make music, how to grieve, how to love. These knowings are not undone by any of the deeper uncertainties we have walked through tonight. They sit beautifully on top of the mystery, like a small candle on a vast quiet table. What we do not know, and probably never will fully know, is the bottom of things. We do not know with certainty what reality is beneath all our descriptions of it. We do not know with certainty what consciousness is, even though we are inside it every moment. We do not know with certainty where the universe came from, or why anything exists at all rather than nothing. Different traditions, scientific and philosophical and spiritual, offer different doors toward these questions, and each door opens onto further rooms. This is not a failure. This is not a sign that thinking is broken. It is simply the shape of being a finite mind, trying to understand a reality that, by its nature, is much larger than any one of us. There is a quiet humility that comes with sitting in this, the kind of humility that does not collapse into despair, but settles into something more like reverence. We can know what we know, work to know more, share what we find, and at the same time admit, gently, that the deepest questions stay open. That mystery is not an embarrassment to our intelligence. It is the natural backdrop against which our intelligence shows up at all. Many of the thinkers who have looked longest at these questions, both in science and outside it, eventually arrive at a similar kind of tone. Not arrogance, not despair, a soft attentiveness, a willingness to keep looking without demanding that the looking finish. And perhaps that is the gentlest place to leave this chapter. The dream of being a mind in the dream of a world is a mystery we did not create, and a mystery we cannot fully solve from inside. There is room here for many ways of holding it. There is room for science with its careful instruments. There is room for philosophy with its long, patient questions. There is room for the felt sense of those who experience something they cannot name, that there is meaning or presence or origin beyond what any equation can reach. None of these need to be in conflict tonight. All of them can sit beside one another in the quiet and let you rest. The deepest answers we might wish to hold tend to slip between our fingers. But the deepest gift, the simple fact that there is something here at all, and that there is someone aware of it, is still in your hands, very softly as you breathe. That is enough. You might expect that learning all of this, that perception is constructed, that the self is a kind of model, that reality may be deeper and stranger than it appears, would make life feel less stable, more uncertain, more unsettled. For some, at first, it does. There is often a small wobble when these ideas first arrive, a feeling of wait, then what is solid, a brief vertigo. It is natural. The mind, having lived inside a particular set of certainties for years, takes a moment to adjust when those certainties are gently loosened. But sit with it longer, and something else often happens. A quiet relief begins to rise in places you did not expect. So many of the things that exhaust us during the day are the things we feel certain about. We are certain we are not enough. We are certain something terrible might be approaching. We are certain we know how someone else feels about us, what they thought when they did not reply, what their silence meant. We are certain about 1,000 small painful conclusions, and we carry them like stones. Now consider, very softly, that all of these certainties live inside the same kind of mental construction as colours and sounds. They are not bare facts about the world, they are interpretations, woven by the same mind that paints the room around you. Confident, perhaps, convincing, perhaps, but not the bottom layer, not raw truth. They are part of the dream too. This is the strange comfort that comes from understanding how the mind builds its world. It does not make life feel less real. It does not make love feel less important, or beauty less moving, or kindness less needed. What it does is loosen the grip of the harsher certainties. The painful conclusions you have lived with as if they were laws of nature begin to look more like weather inside the model. Real, yes. Felt, yes. But not the final word. There is a quiet flexibility that grows from this. The capacity to hold your own thoughts a little more lightly, to notice the inner voice that has been declaring things all day with such confidence, and to gently see it as a voice in the dream, rather than the voice of reality itself. Researchers studying the mind have found something gentle in this direction. People who learn to step back from their thoughts, even slightly, who learn to see them as mental events rather than literal truths, often experience a softening of anxiety and rumination over time. The thoughts have not gone anywhere. The capacity for difficult thinking remains, but the relationship to it has changed. The thoughts are no longer the world, they are weather passing through. And so the unsettling realization that reality is constructed turns, slowly, into a kind of friend. Not knowing what is finally true beneath all the models is no longer a wound, it is a doorway. Through that doorway walks a little more humility, a little more spaciousness, a little more permission to not have everything figured out tonight. The mind has been doing more than you knew, building more than you knew, dreaming more than you knew. That same mind, knowing this, can be a little kinder to itself, less convinced of its worst conclusions, more curious about the alternatives. If you have ever needed a small reason to soften toward yourself before sleep, perhaps this is one. You were never as sure as you thought you were, and that, gently, is good news. There is a particular kind of loudness that arrives in the dark. The body lies still, the room is quiet, the day has ended, and yet, somewhere inside, the mind is suddenly running faster than it ran all day. Thoughts circle, memories surface, worries unfold themselves like long maps that you cannot fold back up. It often feels like the mind has chosen this exact moment, when you most need rest, to be at its noisiest. If you have ever felt this, you are part of a very, very old club. There is, however, a quiet explanation for the phenomenon, and it connects directly to everything we have been walking through. During the day, the world floods you with information. Conversations, sights, sounds, tasks, decisions, screens, faces, surfaces, requests. The brain has to spend most of its energy attending to all of this. It has to filter, sort, respond, anticipate, navigate. There is so much outside input that the inner story-making part of the mind, the part that handles imagination, memory, wondering, gets quieted simply because the outer signal is so loud. At night, the outer signal fades. The room grows quiet. The visual world drops to almost nothing. The list of tasks finally stops calling. And what happens then is precisely what should happen, given how the brain is built. The inner storyteller, the same network that produces dreams, is no longer being drowned out. It rises, it begins to speak more freely, it revisits the day, it reaches into worries, it walks through possible futures, it tells stories about what people might have meant, it composes whole scenes that may never happen. In other words, the loudness of night is not a malfunction, it is the natural sound of the mind without its daytime mask. The same machinery that paints your dreams is awake just a little too long, painting in the dark with the light still on inside. This connects very softly with everything we have already explored. The inner painter never sleeps when the inner editor goes off duty. The dial slides toward inner generation as the outer signals fade. The default mode network, that constant whisper beneath the day, becomes the loudest voice in the room. And without enough sensory input to anchor it, it begins to wander, sometimes peacefully, sometimes anxiously. Understanding this can change how you relate to your own restless mind. The thoughts that arrive at 1 in the morning are not signs that something is wrong with you. They are signs that the daytime noise has finally died down and the inner storyteller has the stage to itself. It is doing what it does. It is being a mind. It also softens, a little, the moral weight we tend to put on these thoughts. We often treat nighttime worries as if they were unusually true, as if the late hour made them more accurate. The opposite may be closer to reality. The same loosening of the inner editor that helps dreams feel real may be making your 3 a.m. conclusions feel more certain than they should be. The dial has slid. The painter is more in charge. The painter, alone in the dark, paints with whatever colors are nearest. You do not have to argue with the mind tonight. You only have to recognize what it is doing. The same brain that gives you sunsets is whispering stories now. It is allowed, and so are you, to listen gently, without believing every word. It would be reasonable, after all this talk of constructions and models and inner paintings, to wonder where beauty fits in. If everything we experience is built by the brain, is beauty also just a brain trick? Is the moment when a piece of music breaks your heart open simply a pattern of neurons doing what they do? The honest answer is that we do not fully know. But it is worth noticing, very gently, that even within the framework we have been exploring, beauty is something quite remarkable. When the brain is busy predicting and modeling, it is mostly looking for matches. It expects something. The world delivers something close enough, and the experience continues smoothly. Most of the day, that is what perception does. It runs in the background. Familiar things stay familiar. Patterns hold, but occasionally something happens that does not just match the model. It does something stranger. It resonates with it. It opens it. It surprises it gently. The sky takes on a color the model did not quite expect. The voice of someone you love hits a note that lines up with patterns running deep beneath thought. A sentence in a book describes a feeling you have carried for years but never named. A piece of music modulates in a way that meets exactly what your inner system was reaching for. In moments like these, something inside seems to lift. We call it awe, or beauty, or being moved. And while the science of these moments is still young, some researchers studying aesthetic experience have suggested that they may involve a particular kind of fit between the brain's predictions and what it receives. Not boredom, where the world is exactly expected. Not chaos, where the world is incomprehensible. But something in between, where the world is just unexpected enough, just rich enough, just patterned enough to feel like a quiet recognition. If the world inside us is a model of the world outside, then beauty might be what it feels like when the model meets something it deeply understands without having predicted. A kind of inner yes, a sign that the painting and the world are momentarily in resonance, in a place that words cannot quite reach. This is gentle speculation, not settled science, but it has a softness to it that is worth carrying. It means that beauty, far from being a brain trick, may be one of the most honest things that happens inside us. It is the model recognizing something, perhaps something it could not even name. It is the inner painter encountering a color it did not invent. The faces of people we love seem to do this. The way late afternoon light falls in certain rooms. The first cool air of evening after a long, hot day. The first few notes of a song that brings memory and hope together at once. None of these are random pleasures. They are moments when the inner model resonates with something that was already there, and the mind quietly opens to it. Even now, lying in the dark, you carry this capacity. Tomorrow, somewhere in the day, something small will likely catch you in this way. A shade of color, a familiar smell, a passing kindness. The model, all on its own, will lift slightly toward it. If reality is partly a dream we are dreaming, beauty is perhaps the dream remembering something true. If each mind is its own private studio, painting its own colors, building its own self, dreaming its own dreams, you might expect human life to feel intensely lonely, each of us locked inside a separate world, never quite reaching another. And yet, somehow, it is not like that. We laugh together at the same joke. We cry at the same lines in the same stories. We agree on the names of cities, the meaning of words, the shapes of trust and betrayal. We fall in love and recognize, in another person, something we did not know we were missing. We raise children, build cultures, sing songs that move strangers we will never meet. The walls between our private dreams are thinner than they have any right to be. How is this possible? If each of us is dreaming a different dream, part of the answer, gently, is in the architecture of the brain. Human brains come into the world with a fierce orientation toward other brains. Babies within hours of being born prefer faces to almost anything else. Their visual system is tuned, before any conscious thought, to seek out the faces of the humans around them. As they grow, they begin to mirror. They smile when smiled at. They cry when others cry. Their inner systems are quietly imitating the inner systems of those nearby, building shared patterns from the start. Over time, this becomes something extraordinary. The ability to imagine what another person might be feeling. The sense, when looking at a friend's face, of glimpsing something of the world from their side of the glass. This is what some researchers call theory of mind. It is not perfect, it is full of errors, but it is real, and it is one of the most beautiful tools the brain has developed. Language adds another remarkable layer. With a few small sounds, you can transfer something of your inner painting into another mind. Not perfectly. The colors do not survive the trip unchanged, but enough survives that the other mind can rebuild something close to it, and respond, and add their own colors back. Across this strange bridge of breath and meaning, two private dreams begin to overlap. This is what makes a we possible. Not because each of us escapes our private dream and meets in some shared neutral place, but because each of our dreams contains, somewhere inside it, a careful model of the others. We do not just dream a world, we dream the people in it, and those models, refined by every encounter, learn to predict and accommodate the other dreamers around us. A long marriage, in this view, is two dreams that have grown into each other over years, until each contains a soft, accurate model of the other. A family is a small constellation of overlapping dreams. A culture is a vast, ancient set of overlapping dreams, taught from one generation to the next. This means connection is not less real because it happens in private dreams. It may be more remarkable. The fact that minds sealed inside skulls build internal worlds that line up enough to share love, to share meaning, to share music, is almost miraculous. Tonight, even alone in the dark, you are not as separate as you might feel. Somewhere out there, other minds carry small models of you, painted carefully over years, and somewhere inside you, models of them are quietly resting. The dream is, in some quiet way, shared. After all of this, the long walk through the architecture of perception, the strange overlap of dreaming and waking, the construction of the self, the deep mystery of reality, what does any of it ask of you? What can be taken from this and gently carried into the rest of the night? Perhaps the simplest thing of all, permission, just a little, to loosen your grip. So many of the small struggles that fill an ordinary mind come down to gripping too tightly. holding certainties as if they were stones we cannot put down, insisting we know what someone meant, what tomorrow will be, what we are worth, what is and is not possible. The grip is rarely chosen. It builds quietly over years. By adulthood, we are carrying so many of these invisible certainties that it can feel like our hands are full. Tonight, in the slow light of all we have walked through, perhaps a quieter possibility opens. The thoughts moving through you, even the loud and worried ones, are weather inside the model. The opinions you have built about yourself, the harsh ones especially, are not the world. They are stories, painted by the same inner artist that paints the room around you. And like all stories, they can be held more lightly than they have been held so far. Some research into mindfulness and contemplative practice points gently in this direction. People who learn to step back from their thoughts, who learn to observe them rather than be carried by them, often experience a kind of softening over time. The same thoughts may still arise, the same painful images may still appear, but the grip changes. There is a small space, a quiet distance between the thought and the one noticing it. You do not need to become a master of meditation to feel a little of this. Even tonight, in this slow hour, you can simply notice that the inner voice, one stream of weather inside you. It is not all of you. It is not even necessarily right. It is part of the dream, doing what dreams do. There is no demand here to believe anything in particular. There is no requirement that you suddenly let everything go, fix every fear, solve every question. The invitation is much smaller and much kinder, just a little less grip, just a little more spaciousness around your thoughts tonight, just a little more willingness to remember that the inner voice is a voice in a long, ongoing dream, not the final commentary on reality. If you can hold this even softly, the night becomes easier to rest in. The thoughts that arrive do not have to be argued with. They can be allowed, they can pass, they can be noticed without being grabbed, and the deeper certainties you have built about who you are can also rest, just a little. The harsh story about yourself can soften, the dread about tomorrow can soften, the need to know how everything will turn out can soften. None of these have to vanish. They only have to loosen. The night does not require you to solve the mystery of consciousness, the nature of time, the construction of the self. It only asks that you let it carry you for a while, that you remember you are inside something far larger than your worries and far gentler than your fears. The grip can soften now. You are allowed. Look back just for a moment at the long, slow path we have walked tonight. It began with a single, almost startling sentence, that your brain has never directly touched the world. From there, very gently it unfolded, the skull as a sealed room, colours and sounds as inventions of the mind, perception as the brain's careful, ongoing guess, the present moment as a stitched-together edit, sleep as a different setting on the same instrument, not an off switch, dreams arising from the same network that wanders during the day, the self as a model, built each morning, revised each night, memory as something rebuilt in the present, not played back from a vault, time, colour, the body, the observer, all softly more constructed than they ever appear. We did not solve anything tonight. We did not need to. What the journey has quietly suggested is something more like a shift of view. The hard line we usually draw between waking and dreaming is softer than it seems. The world inside the head and the world outside the head are not as separate as ordinary mornings imply. Reality, on close inspection, is a beautiful collaboration between what is out there, whatever that finally is, and the mind that meets it with such patient artistry. To say that you have been dreaming your whole life is not to say that nothing has been real. It is to say that the texture of your life, the colours, the meanings, the sense of a self moving through time, has always been more authored than you may have realised. You have been an artist all this time, in the dark of your own skull, painting a world so seamlessly that you forgot the painting was happening, and the same hand that paints the day is the one that paints the night. The same patient, quiet builder is at work in both. There may be one continuous gentle imagining, threaded through every hour of your life, sometimes flooded with daylight signal, sometimes left freer in the dark. One long, soft dream, with phases of more outer light and phases of more inner light, but never quite stopping. There is something settling in this, not a conclusion exactly, more like a quiet rearrangement. The fear that nothing is real eases. The fear that everything must be solved eases. The world is real enough. The mind is real enough. The love and the wonder are real enough. They have always been real in the only way they can be real, which is through being lived from inside this kind of mind. The mystery beneath it all is allowed to stay a mystery. The deeper question of why anything is here, why there is experience at all, why the universe carries these small lights of awareness, does not need to be answered tonight. It is older than tonight. It is bigger than tonight. What you are left with, instead, is something simpler. You are here. The painting is happening. The dream in its long form is still unfolding, and you somehow are inside it, and aware of it, and gently allowed to rest in it. Lay aside, for one slow moment, all the questions we have explored. Forget, just for now, the predictive brain, the default mode, the constructed self, the speculations about reality. Set them softly on a shelf. They will still be there in the morning, and let yourself feel, instead, the simplest fact in your entire life. The fact that anything is being experienced at all. There is something happening right now inside whatever quiet space your awareness occupies. There is a softness of breath, a faint feeling of the surface beneath you, a distant hum of whatever room you are in, or whatever sounds the night happens to carry. There is the quiet receiving of these words, and underneath it all, there is the simple, almost uncountable strangeness that any of this is being known by anyone at all. The universe, as far as we can tell, is unimaginably old and unimaginably vast. It contains long, dark stretches where nothing seems to be experiencing anything. Stars burn alone, planets orbit silently, whole galaxies turn through the dark without anyone watching. And then, somehow, in some corner of all this, small, fragile creatures with quiet inner lights wake up, look around, and notice. You are one of those lights. It would be very easy to take this for granted. Most days we do. The fact that there is someone home inside us is so constant, so woven into every moment, that we forget to be astonished by it. We have to be reminded, by a piece of music perhaps, by a face we love, by the strange sudden sense on certain evenings that we are here, and it is now, and we are alive. That awareness, whatever it ultimately is, does not need to be solved to be cherished. The mystery of consciousness, the deep unanswered question of why experience exists at all, is not a problem to be embarrassed by. It is more like a quiet companion. It walks beside us through every moment. In the long history of everything, you, this version of you, will be alive for a brief, soft window. A window made of mornings and evenings, of meals and conversations, of small worries and small joys. Inside that window, the dream is being lived, and the simple capacity to know that this is happening, to feel the wonder of it even faintly, is itself one of the gentlest gifts existence offers. Tonight, you do not need to make sense of all of this. You only need to notice for one breath that you are here. That is, somehow, more than enough. The night has grown deeper now. Whatever questions came with you to this hour, you can let them quiet just a little. They will not vanish. They are old and patient. They have waited for you many times before. They will wait again. Notice the slow rhythm of your breath, the gentle in, the gentle out. There is no need to control it. It has been breathing you all your life, even while you slept, even while you dreamed, even when you did not think about it once. It will continue. Notice the small weight of your body against whatever is holding it, the soft pressure of the surface beneath your shoulders, your back, your head. You do not need to do anything. The world is supporting you. That has always been true. The mind may still be thinking. That is fine. The thoughts can come and go, like weather inside the model, without you needing to argue with any of them. Let them drift the way images drift in the soft minutes before sleep. Let them lose their sharp edges. Let them fade gently from one to the next, without insisting on conclusions. If a thought rises that feels heavy, You can let it pass without picking it up. You do not have to solve it tonight. You only have to be here, slowly, in this small, quiet space. Imagine for a moment the lights inside the mind dimming, not all at once, just slowly, like the lamps of a long room being turned down one by one. The bright, sharp daytime work of attention is no longer needed now. The inner editor can rest. The inner planner can rest. The part of you that has been carrying everything all day is allowed to set it down, even for a little while. The body knows how to do this. It has been falling asleep your whole life. You do not have to teach it. You only have to allow it. If you find your mind reaching out for thought, like a hand reaching out for something to hold, simply notice the reaching and gently let it return to the breath. The breath is enough. The body is enough. The quiet is enough. There is nothing you must finish before resting. There is nothing you must understand before resting. The day is over. The work has settled. The dream, in its softer form, is beginning to lean toward you. You are allowed to let go. You are allowed to slow. You are allowed to drift now. If you have stayed with this all the way to here, then somewhere, very quietly, the day has already begun to dissolve. The thoughts are softer. The body is heavier. The line between what you are listening to and what you are imagining has begun gently to blur. That is exactly as it should be. You do not need to remember any of this in the morning. You do not need to hold any of it. The mind that listened tonight will carry forward what it needs without effort. The rest can sink like soft stones into still water, settling down into a quiet place. You are safe. The night is around you. Whatever it is that has been listening to these words, whatever quiet awareness has been gathered here, can rest now. Not perform, not solve, not protect, just rest. If the mind drifts toward worry, let it drift past. If the mind drifts toward memory, let it drift past. If the mind drifts toward strange half-images, soft fragments of colour, faces you almost recognize, scenes that begin to play themselves, let them come. That is the dream stepping forward to meet you. There is nothing strange about it. You have been doing this every night of your life. You have drifted into countless dreams, lived inside countless worlds, walked countless rooms that vanished by morning. Tonight is another. The same patient mind that has built every one of those worlds is preparing to build one more. There is nothing to fear in it. It has always cared for you in its quiet way. If, somewhere in the night, you find yourself inside a dream, you may or may not notice it. That is fine either way. Whether you remember it or not, it will do its slow work. The dreaming will sort and soften, replay and release, gently retune the instrument of you for whatever comes next. And when morning eventually arrives, you will wake into another bright, soft, constructed day. The painting will resume. The lights will brighten, the world will pour in again, with all its colours and sounds and small needs. You will, in some sense, step into another dream and call it being awake. But for now, none of that has to be reached for. Now is enough. Breathe in, breathe out. Let the words become quieter than the breath. Let the breath become quieter than the night. And let the night, slowly, hold you. Sleep is near. You can let yourself fall.